So Lucas is a tech entrepreneur, a recording artist, and pastor who has been involved in mobilizing communities across the world in the global fight against poverty for over 25 years. He is the worship and arts pastor at Peninsula Bible Church in Palo Alto, and he's the founder of Glow, which is a startup that's committed to building technology that helps people unleash the power of generosity. So with that, I'd like to introduce Lucas.
Brilliant. Well, g'day everybody, and Joy, thank you for that lovely introduction. And thank you all for joining me in this talk. It's a real joy for me to actually get to do this because it's a talk that I've been thinking about and processing for the last 20 years on how technology and how we can leverage technology to unlock these hidden secrets of generosity and how it will change the world. And what I hope that we get out of today is not just we see generosity in a new light and understand how it can affect our world and our lives, but also, globally as well. So here we go. I started my journey into generosity when I was 16 years old. And I went on my first trip to Zambia. I took a summer and went to serve overseas and worked with a nonprofit and built a school there in Zambia. And I lived with the people, ate with the people, came face to face with poverty like I had never experienced before. And I remember as I flew out of Lusaka airport and looking out over these huts, and I made a commitment to myself then. I said, for the rest of my life, I will spend my days inspiring people to change the world because I can, because I should. I felt compelled to. And so that journey has taken me today to over 40 different countries. I've lived with the Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert in Botswana with a tribe who speak with clicks and sounds. I've been in the Himalayan mountains and all throughout Central and South America. And one of those trips in India, I met my now wife. She was my boss working for a project. We fell in love and got married. And what I ended up doing is I took those stories and experiences and started singing songs, just telling those stories, and ended up spending 7 years traveling to schools and universities and churches, sharing stories, teaching people how to have impact and working with nonprofits along the way. We had kids and I got off the road, and like Joy mentioned, I became a pastor, and I'm now serving at Peninsula Bible Church in Palo Alto, and also stumbled into building technology products and built a video technology called Congo, and now recently focused on building technology on the science of generosity to help people have more impact, which is what we're talking about today. Before we go any further, I think we really need to define what generosity is. I define generosity, and I think this is the correct version of generosity, as giving good things to yourself and to others freely and abundantly. Giving good things to yourself and others freely and abundantly. I like to think of generosity like a measure. Okay, on one end, you're either stingy or you're generous. Right? And it pretty much can be with anything in life, right? So you name it: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, like money. Yes, but so often when we think about generosity, right, we put it in the bucket of, oh, it's only about money. Or sometimes we'll talk about generosity as regards to talent and treasure, right? Sometimes, or talent and time. And treasure. But I want us to take a step back and say, no. This is way bigger than that. Actually, generosity is ingrained in the very DNA of what it means to be human, especially if we think of it like this as a measure. So if we want to understand the secrets of generosity, we need to dig deeper into the science of generosity. UC Berkeley produced a white paper in 2018 called The Science of Generosity. And what they did is they took research from the last 20 years on this topic and then compiled it all together into a great white paper. And if you've got 4 hours, I encourage you to Google it and go read it for yourself. But if you don't have 4 hours, I'm going to surmise it for you. And this is fascinating. Okay. The science of generosity says this, that generous people, number one, live longer, right? Like, hello, Holy Grail, right? We don't need to search for the Holy Grail anymore. It's here. It always has been. If you want to live longer, learn to be generous to yourself and others. Give freely and generously. Pour it out and abundantly, right? Generous people. Number two, have stronger relationships. many of us say like, no, duh, of course, right? And thirdly, they found that generous people experience more joy in their everyday life. So really, we could sum this up and say that actually understanding the power of generosity helps us as humans to experience the fullness of life. These three things would say this is the fullness of life. So again, we come back to our definition: giving good things to yourself and others freely and abundantly. If we do that, the science says we have this. No brainer, right? So then let's do a really quick experiment. This will be the fastest experiment in the history of Passion Talks. I want you to close your eyes right now and imagine a scale in your mind of 1 to 10. And I want you to measure what is your level of joy right now in this moment? 1 being you're super depressed, 10 meaning you're off the charts with joy. Just analyze yourself, give yourself a number, then open your eyes. I want you to pull out your cell phone next, okay? Pull out your phone and I want you to think about somebody that you haven't talked to in a little while. Think of their name, pull up a text, and I want you to text that person why you appreciate them. Be very specific. Stream of conscious, don't self-edit. You've got 45 seconds to do this. Go ahead and text them why you appreciate them, why they're important to you. Think about that person as you do so. Think what would bless them. 35 seconds left. Go for it. And go ahead and hit send. Once you've hit send, I want you to close your eyes again. And that same question I asked you on a scale of 1 to 10, measure your level of joy right now in this moment. We've done that experiment about 450 times. And what we found on average is that people report feeling between 40 and 60% more joy on average after completing that experiment. And after people return and they get a text back from whoever they sent it to, that number goes even higher, right? And it makes perfect sense because in that moment, what you just did, what you experienced was you were generous with your words and with your kindness. And the net result of that was you experienced more joy in that moment. And not only that, but that relationship with that person you just texted is now stronger. Awesome, right? If it's so powerful, I always say, well, why don't we talk about this more? Like, why don't we talk about this more? Why do we only talk about this like when we're in an organization, when somebody wants something from us? I say we need to be talking about generosity way more, and which is why we need to ask this question. As innovators, as leaders, as technologists, as thinkers, and as doers, as leaders, we need to ask this question. How can we leverage technology then to unlock these secrets? Because really, as Christians, our goal is to help people experience more life to the full, right? So why technology? Technology is awesome this is not a definitive list, but technology is phenomenal at these three things. At automation, technology is great at automating the mundane things of life, the things we don't want to do to make us more efficient, right? Technology is great at reaching more people than ever. I don't know about you, but do you remember back in the day, if you were a pastor of a church and you had 2,000 people in your church, you were considered a mega church pastor. Like you were in the club, you were speaking at the conferences. Nowadays, if you have 10,000 people following you on your social media, you're an influencer, but you're called a micro influencer. You're a tiny influencer. Influencers today have millions of followers, 20, 50, 60 million followers. That's what technology can do, okay? Reach more people. And lastly, scale, right? Technology is great at taking things and being able to multiply them and scale them. So then I think the three challenges for us as leaders, as technologists, how do we integrate? We need to figure this out. We need to, number one, we need to build technologies that automate the secrets of generosity. Right? Whether that's on AR, VR, Internet of Things, 5G, B2B, B2C, enterprise software, it doesn't really matter. Whatever technology tickles your fancy or that you're most passionate about, we need to build it based on the science of generosity and help people experience more life. We've seen, great technologies come out. The Abide app, brilliant job. They're killing it. Like, they're doing a fantastic job helping people meditate and sleep better, right? We've got the Headspace and Calm Up that's teaching people to be mindful. One of the things that we're experimenting with Glow is actually what you just experienced. We asked the question, we said, look, what if we give people daily tips where they can do these short activities every day that helps them reprogram their mind based on these principles of generosity to experience more joy. And so we did what we call a 21-day mental health reset, where we gave people these short activities every single day for 21 days. And you know what we found? We found that depression started running out the back door. We found that people struggling with anxiety began to decrease. We found one lady hadn't had a relationship with a brother for 23 years, and that relationship was completely restored. Why? Because she started practicing these principles of generosity to herself and then to others. Guys, it's remarkable. Number two, we've got to create platforms that reach the masses, right? I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see technology platforms that are focused, that are reaching niche demographics, that solve customer needs, and that doesn't make the customer the product, right? Many of our social networks today, we're the product. Our data is being sold to other people. And I think that's going to shift and that's going to change, because all that's done today for the consumer, it's made them not trust. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit. And thirdly, once we've built the technologies that can reach more people, we need to build communities that scale impact, right? That's actually what this is about, impact. Generosity can help people have, the science of generosity can help people have impact in all areas of their life: living, relationships, health, investing, spending, charity. This is another one of the areas we're fascinated with at Glow, and we're like, look, how can we help people when it comes to charity have more impact? Like, is there a way that everyday people like you and I can give away $1 billion a year? We think absolutely there is, right? If you get lots of people together, you pool your resources into a super fund, then vote together to give it all away. Like, that is awesome. And that's how you give away $1 billion. It's a way that innovation has already happened in finance. Like, we do that with mutual funds and the VCs. That's the way they invest. Well, we thought, well, why don't we do that with charity too, to create more impact? And I think there's so much innovation around this space of taking communities, leveraging them with cool tech to really scale their impact. What a challenge. Margaret Mead, who was a super controversial, if not one of the most famous anthropologists, she's very famous for broadening our views on sexuality, on feminism, on discrimination. She said this. She said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So imagine if we did this. Imagine if we could unlock radical generosity and unleash it all around the world. What would the world look like? As I wrap up, this is Liam. Liam's 13 years old, and he represents 70 million Gen Zs. They're passionate about gender equality. They're passionate about the environment. They're passionate about justice. They want impact, but they don't know where to start, and they definitely don't know who to trust. At the moment, I know people, they don't trust the news. They don't trust social media. They trust their friends. So Liam and his older cousins, the millennials, together they represent 160 million Americans. And grab this. This is mind-blowing. Over the next 30 years, they will inherit $59 trillion of wealth. It is called the greatest wealth transfer in U.S. history. If we can teach them, if we can train them, if we can build technologies that help them understand these principles of generosity and living life to the fullest, guys, this is what happens. Not only we can change the world, but they can change the world. They can be the most generous in all of history. Why is this so important? I'm telling you, generosity, as we have defined it today, is the answer to racism. If we were generous with our love, if we were generous with our understanding, there would be no racism in this world. Because we'd realize we're all human. We cut ourselves, we all bleed together, right? Generosity is the answer to mental health. This is why it's so important. You've got to learn to be generous to yourself first. Extend kindness and grace to yourself and help unravel. We extend kindness and generosity in our listening and help our friends unravel. This generosity is the answer to COVID-19. We could end this tomorrow if we all quarantine everyone in the world in our houses for the next month. It's gone. Right? This is big stuff. I'm going to wrap it up with this quote. John Lasseter, we all know his work, Pixar, Disney, and Disney director, right? From Cars and Toy Story. He said this, and I love this. He says, the art challenges the technology. The way I like to phrase it in our context is living is an art, right? So I say the art of living challenges the technology, and the technology inspires the art of living. That is what I'm talking about. That is what this is about. That is a vision worth fighting for. That is a vision we need to put our creative energy into. That's a vision where we need to put our investment into. Because if we do and we get it right, guys, this is the future. We change the world. We do it together. Not only us, our children and our children's children's children. That's all I have to say. I think generosity could literally change the world if we really get a hold of it. So thank you all for listening to my talk.
Great. Thanks, Lucas. I really liked how you redefined generosity for us, very similarly to how Lorenzo kind of reshaped our understanding of diversity. So I'm glad that you're bringing a different perspective about generosity and technology. So with that, I will turn you over to John.
Lucas is a friend of mine, so I appreciate getting to have him on alongside Lorenzo and other people. Lucas, I'm going to do you a favor, but I'm going to do all of us a favor and give you a resounding yes. You're talking about something powerful. I'll tell you why. So I work in investments, right? Financial investment technology. The thing here is we're seeing a $200 billion decrease in traditional investments. And we're seeing that money right now either kept on hold, but 70 billion of that 200 is going to SRI and ESG investments. What are these? SRI, socially relevant, impactful, or ESG, environmentally and sustainable social governance investments. In short, people want to invest, even asset managers, in markets that aren't just doing public things, but private things that have more good for the world. So before I go with the questions, I mean, we're seeing this trend whether we like it or not. So if we don't get on board with what you're doing for generosity, somebody else will do the tone. They will decide where it's going and how it's going to get there. And I think you're giving us a good call because we want to know that we can be the ones to help this generation, as it's already going to have such a massive transfer, to know that there's people of God that are standing up. So I just had to do that. I had to do that shameless plug because it's just the truth. It's what's going on. So that's the first thing. So the first question that I have to back this up is, I love your theology of technology that makes it so relevant and applicable for all of us. And I'd love to know what's giving you this sense of emotional intelligence that you've developed to be able to launch something like Glow. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, well, it began really back in the day when I used to do these presentations in schools, right? To young Gen Zs. When they were young and in school, I would do a talk on clean water. And I'd have 1,000 kids then going, I want to do something. I want to do something. And I saw this major desperation to get involved, right? And I remember at the time I went to the biggest nonprofits that, if you think of a nonprofit that's big in America, that's probably some of the ones I'm thinking about, right? I went and talked to them and I said, hey guys, look, if we could get these kids to give $1 each and we get 1 million of them, like they could give away $1 million a month. Like, wouldn't that be cool? But at the time, this is 10 years ago, they said, it's not really worth our time or investment to go after them, right? Now, so that's 10 years ago. So we fast forward and now I build a technology and I'm like, man, I know how to do this now. And I fast forward and this problem is still there. It's not being solved. And about 9 months ago, I was like, I think there's a reason why this idea has always been in my head, that I saw this back then. And I think I need to be the one who actually builds something to do it. And I just, that said, and that little boy that I showed in the slide is my son. And so I build this not only for me, I build this for him, for his generation. I really do believe they have the opportunity to be the most generous in all of history. And what an opportunity, what a legacy we get to do to help create that for them. So I don't know. I think it's that. And I honestly, it's funny when I think about these secrets of generosity, they're not really secrets. I mean, God's just put them, they've been there for all time. We just don't talk about it. We've just not either watered that grass, or we've never, brought it out into the open, at least not the way I hope we really uncover it, from dialogues like this. So
that's great. Thank you. Well, let's dive into it, because there's a lot of questions. So first up, a lot of folks want to know, have you seen the TikTok trend of crowdsourced tipping for various people? If so, does that fulfill part of the vision you have for generosity? And are there QR codes involved like they do in China, where people have their own QR code? You can scan the code, give things to people there in a crowdsourced way? Or do we need a more systematic approach like you're talking about to really cover our bases?
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, right? I think one of the principle that we've began to learn is that there's such mistrust. Like with crowdfunding has been great. Okay, people have all crowdfunded, but we've all had the same experience, right? You funded something, they were raising $50,000 and they raised $400,000, and you're like, what'd they do with the rest? The reality is they bought a house, right? Because these platforms were built for the nonprofits. The nonprofits are the customers, right? Not us as the donors. So I think there's something to say. I think what the donor wants, what we want, is to know that our funds have been used effectively and for the most impact. And so while I'm a big fan of, QR codes and tipping and all things like this, but I think ultimately when it comes to charity, people really want to know that their money's had impact. So how do you do that without some sort of, system of trust where you can find the best nonprofits and get the data back? Like, let us know the impact in the story. So, that said, I think there's going to be plenty of innovation in the space, right? Like what we're doing isn't the only thing that's going to be out there and what's going to come. We just think it's cool.
That's great. We're looking into some ethical questions that people have about your model. And so that's a really good question and a good thing that you brought up. You're absolutely right. Crowdsource things. People actually even laugh sometimes that if somebody was doing an objective and then they get too much money, well, it's just a happy serendipity that their life is better. But it really does make a question for our audience. Yeah, where is that money going? And they want to know, like, what are some of the criteria that we need to structure into the way that we give? Do you have things that you look at as like worthy endeavors? Do you use Charity Navigator? Do you use like certain metrics that are bulletproof?
Absolutely. I mean, the first place we go, we look at their 990s. How much are they paying their executives? How much of the money that comes in actually goes out to programs in the front line? That's like base point number one. I've actually been overseas and gone to visit a project that we wanted to fund before. This is quite a number of years ago before Glow, but we get on the ground and there's no project, right? The numbers were good here. So part of it is reputation, part of it is relationship, finding the best nonprofits to do the best work. I think it's really important to do your due diligence. Like anyone can go search the 990s. We also partner with other organizations and companies that help us find those best organizations, in our case, to do the research and to find how good are they operationally? How good's their staff? Here's an interesting one. We were going to fund an organization last month, our Giving Circle, but we couldn't because it came out that their CEO got fired because of racism. So it was like, gosh, that's not in their 990s. We found that because, well, we looked online. We did our research into who they are as an organization. What do their employees say about them? So you've got to, look, if you care about it, and I think most people do, you've got to do your homework, do your research. Yeah, just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean that they're great and well run.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's exactly, I think, that you're trying to solve that problem. You want to do that due diligence with your partners and then give back people the confidence through your platform that it's going to make an impact and that you're going to track that and you're going to keep them aware and they can share that and then it can amplify the voice of what's going on. So I really think there's something special here, and the audience likes it too. They like your mindfulness as well. The things of being grateful and thankful and how to operationalize that is something that they really want to look into more. And one other thing they're saying, they would like you to share more about how we can be more generous with ourselves by giving ourselves the permission to give time, money, and mind share and heart to those things that don't benefit us directly. They say people are so busy taking care of themselves, there's a belief they don't have margin for anything else. But we know from psychology, when you help other people, it empowers yourself to be able to do what God's called you to do. So riff on that a little bit about the thing of like people saying, hey, it's a pandemic. Hey, it's a quarantine. Hey, it's an economy that's in a bad situation. I can't give for the next 3 years. What's your response to that?
It's really easy, right? Like, well, you just did an experiment. If you did it, you pulled out your phone and you extended generosity with your kindness and your words. And not only did you bring joy to somebody else, but to yourself, right? Like, a challenge. Here's another one. Whatever you do tomorrow, go for a walk. And when you walk down the street, look at somebody in the eye and just greet them with a smile and say good morning. It is a simple act of generosity that is guaranteed to light up their day and light up your day, right? So I think when it comes to generosity, extending it, that's why I really want to detach it just from money. It's more than money. Being generous, when you look in the mirror, do you see your failures? You're not alone if you do. Most of us do, right? But actually extending generosity yourself and saying, you know what? I'm wonderfully made. There is no one in the world like me. Sure, I've made mistakes, but those mistakes have made me strong. They've made me better. Like, you just extending that generosity to yourself in that way is literally life-changing, freedom-giving. And it just allows you to experience, again, more of the beauty of life. So
that's great. Thanks so much. We've posted about Glow. I'm going to turn it over to Joy.